The long wait is finally over. 4 decades in the making. Randy Gradishar of Orange Crush fame is the latest Bronco to make it to Canton to become a Hall of Famer. Andrew Mason joining us here on Orange and Blue today. He's in Las Vegas. I'm James Merilatt. I'm back here in Denver. And Mase, that was the big news last night. It became official. Randy Gradishar, the latest Broncos player to make his way to the Pro Football Hall of Fame.
Yeah, the thing is, James, we all thought it was a fait accompli, right? When we learned back in August that he was one of the 3 seniors committee nominees. But something happened last night. One of those 3 nominees didn't make it. Randy Gradishar made it. Steve McMichael made it. Art Powell, a terrific receiver who actually, if you were going back through cases for the Hall of Fame, would have a very similar resume to Denver's own Lionel Taylor. Art Powell didn't make it. So even though you kind of felt good when he had the announcement back in August, there was a little bit more doubt and question as it turned out than we realized a few months ago.
Yeah, and look, when he got over the hurdle a few months ago, it kind of became, you're right, everybody thought it was rubber stamped. Mm-hmm. I'm never confident or comfortable until a sure thing is a sure thing.
Yeah.
And there's enough Broncos in the Hall of Fame at this point, Mase. We should probably all kind of get over the fact that they were snubbed for so long, but that's still in me. So yeah. I was nervous last night. I was waiting for it to become the story of only the Broncos would have this happen to them at the 11th hour. But Randy Gradishar avoided it happening. He was clearly excited to get the news. He's been waiting a long, long time for this. Arguably one of the best defensive player in franchise history. He was the cornerstone of that Orange Crush defense in 1977. The 2,000 plus tackles, most in franchise history, is kind of what jumps out to me when you look at his resume in 10 seasons. I mean, that's 200 tackles a year. But what from Randy Gradishar's Hall of Fame resume kind of put him over the top in your mind?
Well, it's not just the tackle numbers. It's going back when you watch him. I mean, there's he was prolific in every area. I mean, I was actually having a conversation with Mike Golick this morning about the Super Bowl matchup. And one of the things we were talking about was how on San Francisco's side, you've got Fred Warner, and on Kansas City's side, you've got Nick Bolton. And these are dudes that are not only among the best at defending the run, coming up and hitting in the box, they're also among the very best at dropping into coverage. And that was something that Randy could do. And when you asked Randy to blitz, he could do that as well. I mean, one of the favorite Gradishar plays I have, and I don't remember this live. I was 2 years old, so I'm just going to put that caveat on there. But in 1978, in the Kingdome in Seattle, he drops back, Jim Zorn throws, and Randy makes this absolute ballet-like toe-tapping interception on the sideline. I mean, this was the thing. He had the power to take care of everything in the box, but he had the athleticism and the grace and the speed to operate in space and be able to make plays like that as a pass defender. I mean, you'd say, he was one of those, as a player, was really one of those rare guys who did not have a single hole in his skill set. And, oh, by the way, was still playing at a Pro Bowl level until the day he walked away from the game after that Christmas Eve playoff game in 1983.
Yeah, it's funny you mentioned the fact that he was such a versatile player, because one of his highlights that I remember, and I'm old enough I actually do remember watching this, was the play in Cleveland on a little screen pass, bounces off of Tom Jackson's leg when he's laying on the ground. Randy picks it off and runs 93 yards for a touchdown. I think it was a Brian Sipe pass. I think it was
1980, right? It was when they went out there to Cleveland.
Yep, if memory serves. So that was a great play, but arguably the best goal line linebacker and short yardage linebacker in the history of the game. I mean, nobody could time it better in terms of coming up over the defensive line and offensive line and meeting the running back as they tried to. That was back in the day when they would try and dive over the pile, and he was great at meeting guys and stopping them at the goal line, stopping them on 3rd and short, 4th and short. Just a great player, someone who has been in the Ring of Fame for years, has deserved to be in the Hall of Fame for a long time. It was a long-awaited honor for Randy Gradishar, and he spoke last night about what it meant and kind of how it went down when he got the news.
Exactly. I'll set this up really quick, Joey. First of all, it started with a bit of subterfuge from Greg Penner and Kerry Walton Penner, who got on the phone and called Randy and said, hey, we want to learn about the Orange Crush. We want to, so who better to ask than you, Randy? And so he agreed to come in there. But as Randy shared with me last night when I asked him about it, the purpose was decidedly different. Here's how he learned he was going to be in the Hall of Fame.
So we walked into the room, in this other room at the Denver Bronco facility, and now there's about 25, 30 media people standing there. And then it finally sunk into my brain that I'm in. And so that was an exciting time. I hugged my wife, and we were so excited and didn't really know what to say. I was just looking at all the media people who were there. And then all of a sudden I turned a little bit farther to the right, and a guy named Tom Jackson and Billy Thompson were there. And certainly everybody knows that we all played together on that Orange Crush. And just realizing the final call has come. I've been only waiting a couple years in order to do this, and so finally the honor came, and I'm just very excited.
Yeah, that's a cool story. It's great that the Penners did that. Obviously, they had no affiliation to the team back then, but the fact that they pay homage to the history of the franchise and to guys from that team is really cool. So a couple of things from that, Mase, that I want to get your thoughts on. First of all, you can see behind me, like this right here, that's from 1977. That's Reuben Carter, first time the Broncos ever on the cover of Sports Illustrated, October 17th, 1977. Up in this corner, I got the Year of the Broncos. That's a vinyl album of all the KOA calls with Bob Martin and all those guys. And so Randy Gradishar is a big part of that. Mm-hmm. The fact that he's the first player from that team, from that defense, to make it to the Hall of Fame is shocking. He should have been first. It just should have been 20 years ago, 25 years ago. So when you look at that team, I mean, you mentioned Tom Jackson. Louis Wright is a great player. I don't know that as good as that defense was, though. There's another player from that group that's even going to sniff the Hall of Fame.
Yeah, it's funny. Like, you think of all the great defenses that have nicknames, right? And that you don't necessarily have to win a Super Bowl. Purple People Eaters, Minnesota, They fell short every time. You look in the Hall of Fame and you see Paul Krause and you see Alan Page and you see Carl Eller, right? I mean, they got their due. And the Broncos did not get their due until here we are, literally over 40 years after Randy Gradishar retired. Yeah, I would love to see Louis Wright get some traction from the seniors committee, a corner who was truly ahead of his time in terms of how he played, a big corner. That was the thing. You remember Louis Wright. You remember the guy who could just basically just reach and make a play. And in a lot of ways was a forerunner to guys like Champ Bailey, the combination of length and speed that he possessed. But I don't see a lot of traction at this point. And, Billy Thompson and Tom Jackson, great Broncos, no doubt. Don't think they're going to get traction as well. I think this is unfortunately probably it for the Orange Crush getting recognized, but at least there's some recognition. And another thing, the ticking of the clock, right? I'm glad it happened now. Would have loved it. Should have happened when he was it should have happened long before, but he was first a finalist from the primary pool 21 years ago. Should have happened then. Should have probably happened when he first became eligible. I think he first became eligible in '89, if I'm not mistaken. Should have happened somewhere around there, right?
Well, you took the words out of my mouth. That was the second thing. And it's a day of celebration. It's a day to be happy. But that is something that kind of drives me crazy. And we've seen it, with the Broncos, right? Pat Bowlen going into the Hall of Fame. He wasn't there to enjoy it. They've had the same issue with the Ring of Fame, right? Like Red Miller went in, I believe, months after he passed away. Is that right?
He learned of it while he was still alive, and because Joe Ellis actually gave him the call. He was planning on being there, and sadly passed away of a stroke several weeks before the actual induction.
Ken Stabler didn't get into the Hall of Fame until just after he had passed away. It's like these guys haven't. I mean, Randy Gradishar hasn't been on the field in 40 years. His stats haven't changed. It's part of what drives me crazy about the whole Hall of Fame process is, a year ago Randy wasn't a Hall of Famer. This year he is. He didn't do anything else in the last 365 days. I get how the process works. It's just me venting, Mase. It drives me crazy, but I'm glad that he's able to enjoy it. He can enjoy it with his family. He can, see all the adulation that's going to rightfully come his way. But it's, the fact that we have to be thankful that he's able to get to enjoy it is part of the problem with the system.
The moment that got me and made me say, okay, enough is enough here was back in the mid-2000s when Harry Carson went in, the great New York Giants linebacker. Really, the only thing that separates Harry Carson from Randy Gradishar is that Harry played a bit longer. And, he won a Super Bowl towards the end. He was a good player on that Giants 1986 team that beat the Broncos in Super Bowl 21. But when you think of that defense, you think first of Lawrence Taylor and Carl Banks, right? Even George Martin up front, a veteran, of course, who had unfortunately seemed to just come up huge against the Broncos.
Yep.
In, I think, both games they played that season. So when Harry got in, that's where I thought, okay, and I kind of did a compare and contrast. I'm like, if Harry Carson is in there, Randy Gradishar has to be in there. And Randy waits 2 more decades, basically, nearly 2 more decades to get in. And that's where the cases of the whole thing of the East Coast bias, that's the argument in favor of that bias existing and not being a myth when Harry Carson has long since been in and Randy had to wait until now.
Yeah, and it's funny how one game can make a difference, right? The 86 Giants won the Super Bowl.
Yeah.
Steve McMichael's going in. The 85 Bears won the Super Bowl. Had the Broncos won that Super Bowl in 77, who knows how it changes. But, Randy's the guy that had the longevity to get in. The defense was great, but it didn't really last all that long. That name has lasted forever. But if you think about it, up front, Barney Chavis was a Bronco forever. For a long time, he held the franchise record for most games played. I think Elway broke his record. Reuben Carter, who's on this poster behind me, but he was a Hall of Fame player. Lyle Alzado arguably was, but then he went to Cleveland and went to the Raiders and had all of his issues. Those linebackers, Bob Swenson got hurt, Joe Rizzo, Tom Jackson's probably the next closest. Billy Thompson, Louis Wright. I don't know who else would go in. You can't really make an argument for anybody else. So Joe Collier's defense, and Randy talked a lot about Joe yesterday.
Yeah.
Joe Collier's defense was great. I do think it was a great defense that unfortunately had one Hall of Famer.
I'll tell you what, the other thing on TJ, because he did play up to Super Bowl 21, and if that game goes a little differently, because TJ's never gotten any traction, not in the primary pool, not in the seniors pool. But if they win Super Bowl 21 and you look at TJ being a part of the Orange Crush and playing 15 years and walking away with a big ring on his finger, who's to say that he isn't a Hall of Famer by now? I mean, that's just kind of the way this thing works. And also with Randy, maybe because Harry Carson played longer than Randy Gradishar. They're basically, their careers crossed over for, I believe, a good 9 seasons in the end. But Harry kept on going until the late 80s with the Giants. And you do wonder if maybe for Randy, if he had stuck around through Super Bowl 21, if he would have gotten into earlier as well, because even without a Super Bowl win, being in 2 Super Bowls, would have probably added a couple more Pro Bowls, because he was still playing at a really high level when he was done. Actually, go back and watch him, I think in that Baltimore game, the last home game that he played. Intersection of last home game for Randy Gradishar and first big John Elway comeback.
Yep.
Same day, December 11th, 1983.
Yep, 19-0 down, scored 21 in the fourth quarter. It was the first big comeback.
It's funny. If we were to make a list of 10 really important dates in Bronco history, that would probably be on there, even though it may not be as obvious as like a Super Bowl or drafting John Elway. But
Yep.
it was Randy's last game, and it was the day that everyone started realizing, okay, it's been a rough go for this Elway kid, but there may really be something extraordinary there, and it turned out there was.
All right, before we get on to what Sean Payton said today on Radio Row, we got a Bronco nerd this. Can you name the 3 players who scored a touchdown in that fourth quarter?
Okay. God.
One should not have been a touchdown. He only got 1 foot down.
Okay, I think did Clint Sampson score one? Okay.
Yep, that's one. That he only got 1 foot down, but that was before replay.
I'm gonna blank on the other because I think we got Gerald Wilhite scored, right?
He scored the game winner. He did the backflip over there in the northwest corner of the stadium.
And this is the really obscure one. Oh, man alive.
And I'm going off the top of my head. I'm 99% sure I'm right, so we'll fact check.
When you say the name, I think I'll know.
I'm pretty sure it was running back Jesse Miles.
Yep, Jesse Miles. Yep,
I think that's who it was.
Because I rewatched that game during the pandemic, and I'm like, okay, I knew Sampson, I knew Will, and I'm like, who is this Jesse Miles guy? And he just made a big play in this game. Yep.
Jesse Miles.
Yes.
All right.
So long ago, it was against the Baltimore Colts. That's again another how much time has gone by.
All right, Mase, you're out there in Vegas. You're at Radio Row. Sean Payton was making his rounds today, much like he did a year ago in Phoenix. Last year, he had duties as a broadcaster for Fox. What was the reason that the Broncos head coach was there today? What was the highlight from his conversations he had as he made his way around Radio Row?
He's promoting Zebra Technologies, which provides a lot of film and tech stuff and data stuff for NFL teams. So that's what brought him to some of the national things last year, as well as working for Fox. It brought him here today. So she chatted with, for example, Dan Patrick or Rich Eisen. He chatted, I believe, with Dan Patrick as well. Did he not?
I think so, yeah.
And he chatted with Kay Adams. We'll start with kind of the top line stuff. Says their draft meetings don't begin till Monday, so they haven't really. So he was basically refuting the whole stuff of they're going to trade up. I'm going to defend Cecil Lammey here on this because he made it clear it was scouts' buzz that they were going to trade up, right? It wasn't they were going to do it, and then Tony Pauline was on a national level talked about it as well. That was the belief in the scouting community was that the Broncos are going to trade up, but it is too early to know whether they will or they will not. I mean, we're in embryonic stage. They spent the last few weeks going through the season, doing their end of season evaluations. Next week they start getting in the draft, and what is interesting is that the evaluation of Russell Wilson, in terms of making a decision whether you're moving on from him or not. Draft has something to do with it because they're looking to see, okay, who else is out there? Who can we get? But Sean Payton also, in one of his conversations said he's looking for a quarterback who can process. He wants a quarterback who can process quickly. He also said to Kay Adams he's looking for a perfect marriage. But he kept saying, hey, I have a good relationship with Russ. Okay, there's a difference between a good relationship and a perfect marriage, right? Yeah. I mean, I think we all kind of know that in life, right?
Yeah, no doubt.
I mean, yeah.
And, it's funny because over the last couple of weeks, and I told this to Will Peterson on Denver Sports Tonight right after the benching happened, that it wasn't outside the realm of possibilities that Russ came back, right? Like, they wanted him to move back that trigger. My guess is, we never found out from March 18th to when. My guess is to after the draft so they could see what else they had and then make a decision. Mm-hmm. Now they're going to have to extrapolate a little bit and say, okay, we're sitting at 12. Here's who we think we can get. They'll know in free agency what they could or couldn't get. I still don't think it's outside the realm of possibilities he comes back. You talked to a numbers guru out there who said, hey, the Broncos would be making a mistake to move on. I've been making that argument for 2 months that eating $37 million in cash this year and $85 million in cap space the next 2 years, I just think is economic foolishness. Did you get a sense from Sean Payton's conversations today that they're still making that decision? Because he said they would do this quickly, at his end of the press conference. That was a month ago. They haven't played a game in it'll be 5 weeks on Sunday. What has taken so long? What's going on? How do you read the tea leaves, Mase?
Well, he used again when he referred to Russell Wilson that was going to basically be the first decision made, right? It's going to be a decision that comes quickly, and I think part of it is just going to be getting his arms around it. But I'll say this: given what he said about Caleb Williams last year, when he was working as a broadcaster, I'm gonna call BS on him saying, "Oh, I don't even know the numbers of these guys." Like,
yeah.
Okay. I'll just kind of go through it. Given that he's got a very tight connection with a key assistant coach, offensive line coach at Tulane, who worked for Sean Payton for 9 seasons with the Saints. As that's the connection to Michael Pratt. We know that Michael Pratt met with Broncos officials twice. That's the key thing. Twice at the Senior Bowl. Once, shoot. You have a conversation with everybody down there in Mobile, right? If you're working, enough people down there working for a team. It's twice that I think is notable there. So that's why I kind of hear that. I'm like, I'm not sure about that. And also, in light of what Drew Brees was saying when he was on with Mike Florio of Pro Football Talk, talking about how he's kind of got he thinks Sean's kind of got an idea what's going on here. I think some of that today was a little bit of doth protest too much.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I'm with you. I'm still optimistic. Everybody knows I'm a Russ guy. I think it'd be foolish to let him go given the financial constraints that they'll be under. But I still think it's going that way. I do think we'll get that news here in the next couple of weeks. All right, we're
one thing real quick, James, that just kind of hit me as we're talking about this. Aaron Schatz was saying, "Hey, I'd bring Russell Wilson back."
Right.
Talking to ex-players like Boomer Esiason, Phil Simms, Jay Feely, it's like the damage is done here. Matt Ryan alluded to that. You can read about that at denversports.com and see it on my socials as well. Basically he thought, hey, Russ played well last year, but the damage has been done. It's irreparable. You can't really go back. And I think that's probably the reality of what we're looking at right now.
Yeah, and that's the problem with the way they handled it. Not only at the end of the year, but going back to after the Chiefs game when the conversation started about redoing his contract. They blowtorched the bridge, unfortunately. Now if they want to turn around and go back over it, I don't think they even have that option. But, hey, earlier when we were talking about Randy Gradishar, we were getting into how important another Super Bowl or a Super Bowl win would have been on his resume and some other resumes from people who played on that Orange Crush. It just tells you how important Sunday's game is. You're out there in Vegas. Sometimes we forget there's a game to be played at the end of all of this. Niners a 2-point favorite. So Patrick Mahomes, the underdog, the defending champ's the underdog. Not that it means everything, Mase, but, last year in Arizona, we kind of could start to pick up a little bit of a vibe. What's your vibe in terms of the football game from being out there?
I mean, you got two teams that are experienced in this. Now, 49ers a little less experienced because it's been 4 years, but they're handling this with a seasoned professionalism. You're getting that with the Chiefs. This isn't like Super Bowl 50 Broncos-Panthers where you've got one vibe on one side, one vibe on another. I think this is ultimately – it's interesting when we talk about Patrick Mahomes and Brock Purdy, the contrast. But a big thing here is you've got two very good defenses as well. San Francisco stronger in the front seven. Kansas City stronger at all 3 lines of defense. That, I think, might make the difference in this game. Watching Kansas City against Baltimore – and some of it is we're going to concede yards, but we're going to make plays on you. And that's an interesting thing with the Chiefs is like they can, they basically can take the game and massage it to what they want to do. If it's a game where they're, okay, do we need to limit yards and just stop them at the source? Yes. But if we have to bend but don't break, we can play that game too. And part of that is the luxury of Patrick Mahomes at quarterback and knowing that he can kind of get you out of things. So I have a slight edge toward the Chiefs in this game, but we'll see.
Yeah, me too. I think most of Colorado is rooting for the Niners, given all the connections, right? It's McCaffrey, it's Shanahan, Anthony Lynn, like the connections back to those back-to-back Super Bowl teams. There's a bunch of them, so I think that's where the rooting interest lies. But yeah, if you're going to give me the defending champs, you're going to give me the best quarterback in football, arguably the best quarterback in the last 6-7 years, and you're going to give them to me as an underdog. Unfortunately, I'm leaning toward the Chiefs, and that pains me. Pains me as a Broncos fan, Mase. All right, final thoughts from being out there this week. What's your number one thing? 10 years from now, what's the story you're going to be telling?
10 years from now, the story I will be telling, we'll see. Maybe it has yet to be written. I'll be talking about the media party over at the F1 pits on Tuesday night. I'll be talking about Phil Simms, and you can see that on my socials, being completely anti-analytics. I'll be talking about all the Taylor Swift stuff. I mean, you have people wearing like Taylor Swift shirts and all that. You can't get away from that chatter at the media availabilities, even like whether it was Teams, whether it was CBS Talent. You weren't very far from somebody asking about Taylor Swift. That's, it does. Yep. I'd say this is the Taylor Swift Super Bowl, for better or for worse.
Yep, I think you are 100% right. All right, Mase, it's flies by. Could not have been easier. I haven't done this show in a while.
Hey, welcome back.
I got to turn it over to you. I believe you get to send us out of here, right?
Exactly, because I got to tell you all to do all the YouTube things. Like, comment, share, subscribe. Hit the notification bell so that you don't miss a vid. You're up to date on Orange and Blue Today. You're up to date on Coffee Break. You're up to date on all the other shows that we've got in our programming here at denversports.com. You don't want to miss any of those. So make sure you subscribe and keep following us. And hey, thanks for joining us for another week. He's James Merilatt. I'm Andrew Mason. Cecil Lammey will be back with me on Monday next time, but we're going to have some bonus editions this weekend from some sit-down interviews that we had, so check those out. Plenty more to come. Orange and Blue Today. We'll have some bonus for you this weekend, and we'll be back on Monday. Take care.